I think this, as a portfolio of the Academy's recording history, is immensely impressive for us. It reminds us that in those years, our recording time with Decca, we covered 4 centuries of musical history. We started, of course, with Bach and Handel and Vivaldi. We moved on a century to Mozart and Beethoven. We moved on yet again to another century of Mendelssohn and Dvorak. And we virtually finished up in the 20th century with Stravinsky and Michael Tippett. When we pursued this history, we were very much guided by the musical directorship of the record company. People like Harley Usil, who started it with Argo, Michael Bremner, who was also with Argo, and then very importantly with Eric Smith, who really took over the latter few years of our recording history. And they were not only influential in our taste in repertoire, but also the standard of which we were trying to acquire. The sound of the Academy, which became quite famous, it was unique in a way that an orchestra had a recognizable sound. And that was also governed by the extraordinary technical brilliance of the engineering there. People like Kenneth Wilkinson, Stan Goodall, really made it possible for the Academy to put onto record the sound that it had always envisioned that it would like to make, that he'd been working so hard to achieve. And suddenly, by magic, there it was, just as we had hoped, on gramophone record. So this, to us, is a very important collection of our work in the last 30, 40 years. I think when we recorded Opus 3 for the first time, we were working on a larger enterprise than we'd done before. We'd done individual pieces before. We'd never done a whole concept of music like Opus 3 for Handel. And it gave the Academy, as it was in those days, a collection of friends. Everyone had something to say about the way we played it, and also became individual soloists in that piece. It was very important to us. This was my version of these incredible, technically demanding pieces of music. But the Academy was stuffed full of virtuoso violin players at that time. And I think it gave us one of our first opportunities to really show off the virtuosity of the playing. I think when Hugh Maguire came to join us in the Academy as the first violin, it reminded us that basically the Academy is a chamber music ensemble, and this was our big opportunity to exploit the potential of the players in the Academy at that time. I think the Stravinsky record was the Academy's first opportunity to explore the possibilities of an ensemble that size in the 20th century, or late 19th, 20th century. I think that, first of all, our big surprise was the immense satisfaction of finding something so extraordinarily comprehensible for the sort of ensemble we were at that time. But also that the public reaction to us playing this music. We'd become somewhat typecast because early music had taken us by the throat, really. And to suddenly to be able to go on stage and play 20th century music was really quite a treat for us. This was Verkletternacht, was it not? Yes. And indeed, that was something I passionately felt that the Academy would play remarkably well. It involves, of course, every player is important. In the original sextet version is amplified by just doubling up the parts all the time. But I think one of my great regrets was that there was one performance I remember we'd done somewhere in France, was a broadcast performance, and I came off stage unable to speak. It was one of those occasions where you suddenly realized you might have got it right. And we celebrated the occasion, only to discover that French radio had broken down in the middle of the performance, and we never were able to retrieve that performance. The seasons with Alan Loveday was quite remarkable. He himself was one of the least discovered virtuosi violin players of English musical history, I think. He was quite extraordinary, and I think this was the peak of his performance. He was not particularly happy at that time, I think, musically, really, because I think he felt immense frustration with the way his career had developed. And he always deserved much, much more. But I remember when we eventually, I remember when we eventually got the gold disc that this record achieved, bringing it back from some celebration, it was dropped by a member of the Academy. And to our horror, it was destroyed and unplayable. But we were able to sort of pick it apart and discovered that the gold disc was not even one of our discs. It was some other orchestra that had been painted gold and given to us as a token. I love this record. It slightly haunts me, though. Every time you get onto a British Airways aeroplane, you tend to have this music sort of accompanying you, trying to get your luggage in the rack or take your seat quietly. It hasn't diminished my appreciation of the music, but it does tend to haunt me. I think the Bach suites that we recorded with Thurston Dart were his return gift to us, because we had agreed earlier to record the Brandenburg concertos in his rather extraordinary edition. He was taking a risk with Bach and with Thurston Dart, of course, to do this, but strangely enough it was successful. But then I said I would really like to record the suites, and Bob decided he would join us, and he even accepted my version of the suites. And as a musicologist, of course, he was the most important person in England, and certainly the most important person we knew who could give us some guidance. I think the early symphonies of Mozart that we recorded, 25, 29, were, I suppose, some of the most rewarding in our lives. Later on, we became rather notorious or well known for our performances of Mozart symphonies, but 25 and 29 particularly were the ones that marked us. And of course, they eventually leaked into the film Amadeus, where they were used very dramatically, and really were one of the most important characters in the film. Bizet and Prokofiev, yes. Oh, I'm particularly fond of the Bizet Symphony. At that time, we had a remarkable young oboe player, Celia Nicklin. And of course, the Bizet Symphony is the oboe's piece, really. I mean, she is virtually the soloist throughout. But I just remember with great pleasure the way the Academy enjoyed touring around the world playing the Bizet Symphony. Corelli was another one of the earliest works where the Academy was still defining its style. I think with the help of Thurston Dart, we had discovered the conventions of playing music of that period. But I think Corelli gave us our first chance to really establish what the Academy sound was going to be like in Italian music. La Stravaganza was really Iona Brown's piece. Iona had come to us as a young player, starting really mixed up in the general body of the orchestra, and had obviously distinguished herself very quickly as an exceptional interpreter. And I always think of Stravaganza as being Iona's piece. It was obviously one of our journeys into music of the same period as the Italians that we'd been playing. But Telemann, in a way, didn't give us very much opportunity to identify it as a particular style. I think we just enjoyed playing the music. Samuel Barber, of course, is best known for this piece. I suppose his reputation in England was virtually made on this. But my interest in American music was really started at a time when the Academy was quite young. I'd already started establishing another orchestra in Los Angeles, an American orchestra. And of course there, Samuel Barber to them is Benjamin Britten to us. And so I think perhaps, I suppose, my interest was really in the nationality of the composer rather than in his career. It's the sort of music, I suppose, that I could interchange between the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra and the Academy. And it was quite interesting to denote the difference between the two performances. I think one of the great pleasures that we found looking for major works of English composers of that period of the 17th century, really, I think it was just a happy accident that we encountered Boyce as an English composer. We're usually rather embarrassed looking for composers between Purcell and Benjamin Britten. And I think Boyce was such a happy accident for us. We really did enjoy it. The Messiah, of course, was a piece I was brought up on. My father was an amateur conductor, and an annual event in his life was the Messiah, of course. Then when I went to school, we had the Messiah again, and then when my son went to sing in King's College in Cambridge, we were Messiahed up to the neck, really. But then we were introduced to Laszlo Heltai as a chorus master, and he put together perhaps one of the most exciting ensembles, vocal ensembles, that I worked with at all. And of course we took the Messiah around the world, and fortunately I think there is quite a good video performance of the Messiah. And I think in that Laszlo Heltai gets his full appreciation. I think around this period, in the 70s, I'd done an American television production of something called Scandinavia Today. And I was introduced to rather more Scandinavian music than in my ignorance I had really appreciated. And this is such an unusual collection of pieces that I'm delighted to have them in my repertoire. I suppose of all the pieces of Mozart that we play, the Requiem is perhaps the one that digs deepest into your thoughts. We were lucky that we were able to perform it, or most of it, I suppose, on the film Amadeus. And in an extraordinary way, because the film itself went around the world, this became one of the parts of the repertoire that perhaps the Academy has performed most with its chorus. For much of its life so far, the Academy had been basically a string ensemble. And when we were asked to record the Mendelssohn symphonies, it gave us a chance to add an equally distinguished group of musicians that we already had in the string ensemble. And I think this is memorable for us because we made a team of players there which stayed together for many years, and I'm delighted to say with some distinction. Well, of course, the Souvenir de Florence, again, is another moment for the Academy to exploit its virtuosity as a string ensemble. Taken from the smaller grouping that it was originally written for, it really does expand enormously satisfactorily into the orchestral version of Souvenir de Florence. Weber's symphonies are, I suppose, the beginning of the symphonic life of the Academy. They are undoubtedly sort of bold in concept, I think, and of course for their period they were very adventurous. But for us, it was a part of the repertoire that we wished, I think, that we'd been able to take around the world a little bit more lavishly. Well, of course, the Academy was very much at home with this repertoire. We'd all grown up with it. We even had known the composers, some of the composers personally. We were just about old enough to stay in touch. But of course, atmospherically, it is very much in our blood. I think having explored the English atmospheric music, it was a pleasure to move across the water to France and see if we could recapture some of the same sentiment that we'd found with the English connection. I think with this earliest recordings, it was really the beginning of the Academy's career. Thanks to Louise Dyer, this extraordinary Australian lady who sponsored these first recordings, asked us if we would record this music. She had just bought a publishing company in Paris called Oiseau Lyre, and she wanted some of her music on record. And much to the Academy's surprise, not only were we paid for making the record, but we got remarkable reviews for it. We didn't expect this. We're not used to being praised so lavishly. And I think on the strength of that, the Academy's recording history was founded. And so we are grateful to what we used to call the ice cream merchants, what were they called? Albinoni, Locatelli, Torelli, Corelli, Albicastro. They were all magic names to us. And no longer do we make a joke about it. We were just extraordinarily grateful that we were ever allowed to put them on record.